Welcome back, folks, to the conversation series here on Get a Grip on Lighting. And we're sad to say that this is our final episode with Henrik Clausen. And what a run. Very well received by the audience in both North America and Europe. And, we're going to talk a little bit about what that journey was like for Henrik. Before we do that, though, I want to tell you about our friends at Keystone Technologies, the Big Easy, I call them. That's right. Light Made Easy. Go to KEYSTONETECH.com. And of course, our presenter, the platform we stand on, the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors. If you're a lighting distributor, why not consider joining us? We do so many things for the industry. But you know what? A lot of people, I just had a trade show last week, which is why my voice is a little bit hoarse. But a lot of people ask me, what's my ROI for joining Nailed? And I'm starting to respond to people with, what's our ROI for having you as a member, actually? It's actually the other way around. This is where distributors come to give back to the industry, to share their knowledge, to advance the industry as a whole. It's not some kind of buying group or some place where you measure the $500 membership fee against the increased profit you made on it last month. This is a place where we get together as practitioners in the industry that sell light bulbs, that have a warehouse and a counter, and we talk about what the government should do about our industry. And we start to set policy and advocacy in these kinds of things. So if you're interested in giving back, if you're interested in being part of the movement, go to nald.org. Henrik.
Michael.
It's been quite a journey.
It really has. It's been wonderful. It's been cool to meet you and Scott and the other guys at Get a Grip on Lighting. So I've been looking forward to it every time we've done something.
I often I didn't listen to all your shows, but I listened to 4 of them, I think, in full. And there was like something going on there to me where there was a purpose you were looking for. Why are we doing this? But from a very high level. What did you find? Am I right? Was there something to that, or tell me a little bit more?
That was what I was striving for. Of course, first of all, I'm really disappointed that you only listened to 4, but I'll put that aside. And you have something for a rainy day. No, it's some of the people that I really admire, and I think and I hope it came to view in my questions and in my respect for these people. And I've always been in the industry to gain knowledge. That's sort of my job description here at Fagerhult, and to distribute knowledge. And I consider myself this filter, being an electrician trained, being electrical engineer. So whenever all these scientists have some fluffy ideas, how do we go there where the rubber meets the road, where we're actually putting fixtures into the ceiling? And I think during my 25, 30 years in lighting, I've had a pretty good grip on that. So you can actually tell people what the benefits are in the plain person's language, so to speak. But I've had the privilege of learning to know these people, and I can ask them silly questions and they can answer me, and I can hopefully bring it further on.
I would say that what struck me was your interest in them. Like you were, what I always liked about when I was listening to the conversations was that you were genuinely interested in their contribution and what they did, and that really came across well. What would you say? How has it impacted your career, and what have you learned?
Do you mean the sessions we've had here? How that?
No, the sessions you've had with your guests on the conversation.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's definitely given me a review, because many of these people I've met in international projects or at researchers gathering. But before you make a series like you do, you have to do some research. What is the latest they've been up to? What are they doing now? You have to dig into them, and sometimes you come across something. I said, whoa, that's a nuance. I haven't heard that before. And I took that down so I could talk a little bit about my memories, some things we've done together to connect. And then I could add something that I found that I didn't know they've been doing until, and ask, would you share that with us? And they were all super willing to share. That was surprising, because they weren't warned to begin with. I didn't call them and say, I'll be asking you this and that, but they were very, very open and I think they trust me because they've known me for many years that I
Mm.
bring it on bring it further in a nice and educational way.
That's the power of the podcasting medium, is that idea that we don't know what we're going to talk about, but we're going to share a conversation with each other that we're going to have, which is going to feel very personal, but we're going to let others listen to it, but we're going to remain authentic in that. So thank you, first of all, on behalf of the board of directors of Nailed, and of course Get a Grip Management, and Scott for actually contributing the way you had over the last, I guess, 8 months. It's been.
Yeah, you're
Um,
welcome.
yeah, I wanted to change gears a little bit here and say, okay, the pandemic is over, or whatever. Things are much different and easier now than they were. Whatever your opinion is on that, or the
Mm.
listener's opinion is on that. Um, what have we learned since 2020? What's different in lighting today and coming out of the pandemic and with your practice and your work? What's different now?
That's a very good question, Michael. It's before the pandemic, we talked a lot about light for people. We talked about tunable light fixtures, and we talked about doing doing good lighting design so that you could have a let's say a meeting room where you have some cool light if you wanted to do a brainstorm session or if there has to be a lot of action. And if you wanted to have an appraisal conversation or a coffee break, you could dim the lights, turn them into a more warm color, and you could have a more intimate dialogue where you lower your voice, you lower the speed, and not that aggressive as you have in a cool atmosphere. But the big question was that when people started to work from home, it is different to meet people in 2D instead of meeting them in 3D. So I've only met you in 2D. You look a bit flat, but I still like you. So it's a matter of getting that perspective. And we have asked so many people, why would you be coming back to the office? Because it really works working from home. And people were afraid, should they come back? Shouldn't they come back? And we started talking about lighting the office to bring people back. Because we think if we can make really good lighting at the office, that would be one thing. Because many people don't want to take the commute anymore. They want to stay home. And they found out that when 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, when they are off, they're actually home right away. So they don't need an hour to commute. So we have to give them a reason. So I think the people I've spoken to have given me that feedback that we can work everywhere, but we can only share on a face-to-face level, on a really genuine. It would be lovely to meet you and the rest of the team sitting around a table, having that beer you talked about at the conference, and whatever, just to see each other real. Because if I come with a suggestion to you or an idea, I would look at your face to see if you like my thoughts or if you like what I'm telling you. So we've done a lot about saying we want to do lighting in the office of the future to meet and to share ideas. That's much more than having 500 lux on a keyboard and 300 lux on the wall and balance on some lux levels as we've always done. So I think it will go more into an architectural lighting design way instead of staying just with 500 lux in an open plan office. That that was the first part. You had a second part. Would you repeat that?
Coming out of that, I can't remember, but I have a
Okay,
response to what you're saying, and we'll probably pick
please
it up
do.
a bit more. But I was at the ArcLight Summit in Dallas, Texas last week, and the roof blew off that place. People were so excited to see one another again, and
Yep.
we were talking about the difference between the Zoom, Teams, Google Meet calls, and all this sort of stuff, and being together in person. And what's interesting is that I think these are excellent as part of a mix, and a lot of things you can get out of the way where you just want to see the person's facial reaction and that sort of
Yep.
stuff. But I really think that we need to get together as an industry, and I think that a lot of the things that have happened that are not positive in lighting, um, some of the warranty issues, some of the failure to focus on dark sky issues is
Hmm.
that it's so obviously a problem is because people aren't making those trust building connections in person, which are the
Yeah.
prerequisite for successful
Yeah.
Zoom calls and
Yeah.
Google Meets in the future. And so I
Yes.
think I agree with you. And if you can use lighting is going to be part of that tool to bring people back in the office. What is it exactly you're referring to, though? Is it color tunability? What is it that
No,
you're going to do?
no, no. It's just I've always had a presentation that is called "Light is a carrier of communication," because the visual communication between you and me, if we are standing outside on a sunny day with maybe a little overcast and we are standing walking in the forest chatting with each other, and we cast a glance to each other once in a while when we are going there just to see if the other one is comfortable, we have 100% bandwidth when we are out in nature in daylight. That's what we are
Mm,
evolved for. That's what we are calibrated for. If you go in with fluorescent tubes, color rendering 80, you throw away 20% of the information that flows between us. Because your skin tone, your small nuances would be difficult to see. If we have high pressure sodium, the old yellow one, we threw away 50%. And everybody can see that because, oh, you look strange in that light. But
mm.
it's not an on off, there's a scale. So that's why we've changed. Everything is now color rendering 90, and we are getting there. And it's I think the color rendering is a good measure of the bandwidth in a visual communication because that's what we like. It's very hard to make new friends in this media, but it's relatively easy to sustain a friendship. Now you and I are different kind because we met here and we've only been like that and it works very well, but it has taken quite a few hours. We've talked a lot with each other, but we cannot really do a hiring interview. We can't close a big order
No.
on this one unless you know each other very well.
Hmm. I agree.
So,
And I'm going to comment on what you just said there. Do you know Dr. Jennifer Veach? She's a Canadian
oh
lighting
yes,
scientist,
yeah,
right?
yeah, I
I
know
would.
her.
She insisted on coming into the studio to do the interview with me, so we were in person, and it was such an honor.
Yeah.
I put a tie on and a suit and
Ooh.
everything. Yeah. Okay. And so
Yeah.
she was sitting here, and I was listening to her speak about integrative lighting and just the different factors of it. And my first comment was, I felt like I was a fish figuring out that I was in water. You know what I'm saying? That
Yeah.
we live in light and darkness is
Yes.
light. And that, you said it earlier about the scales. I think the linear two-dimensional scales is the wrong way to talk about lighting, though. Even though we use CRI and we understand what we mean, I think it's three-dimensional. There's depth, there's vividness, there's um,
Mm.
preference, there's color temperature. And so there's almost like a unified light measurement that we need to come up with. TM30 and the IES has been working on I think is on the way there, but there's something more going on.
Yeah,
And
but if you imagine that, I try to help people understand it by imagining light as a field, like a gravitational field, a magnetic field. It's everywhere. Like the gravitation is everywhere where we are. It's like if you drop something, it'll fall here. And there's also a light field, but we only talk about the boundaries: the lights on the wall, the lights on the floor, and the lights on the table. We never address the intensity of the field because I can move around and the shadows will look different on my face when I move in this field.
mm,
But if you do it with a gravitational equipment or a magnetic equipment, you can measure densities in the field. But we never do that. So it's about developing a probe, and you've probably seen those cubes like a big dice where you have 8 lux meters or six lux meters on, and they take the average of the light that comes in from all the side, and you put it on a stick, put it into the light, and then you get actually a holistic idea about how a person would look in there.
well,
So there are some approaches, but it's hard to do.
I think we should start with the extremes when we explore this. And one of the things we were talking about at ArcLight was the circadian idea, the
Mm.
improving human health outcomes. I'm very tentative in to talk about that space. Okay, but I like the two extremes I've kind of stumbled over. And the first extreme is that casinos know that if you want to get someone to give you your paycheck, shine 5,000 Kelvin directly into their eyes. Okay? So we know
Yeah.
that that's true, right? No matter what anybody says about circadian and productivity and they're not sure, whatever, we know that it works for casinos. The other side of the coin is we know that in doing the Restoring Darkness podcast, that if you go out into the darkness and allow your eyes to adjust, you will begin to be able to see at night. And so we have these two extremes where we know that our eyes are these magical things that are not being used fully. And so this idea of expanding into the darkness and exposing ourselves for significant amounts of time, not running out to the shed and grabbing something and running back inside, but maybe actually lying and looking up at the stars in as much darkness as you can get, and then standing up and realizing that you can actually see a lot better after an hour and 15 minutes than you could when you first walked out, and it feels like it's brighter. And so we have these two extremes. What can we do in between those two things to help people, to bring them into the space, to make them more feel better? You know, how do we, if those two extremes are real, now what can we do every day?
You know, we are working on like 0 to 100,000 lux, right? 0, that's pitch black out there, 100,000 lux bright sunlight. And we talk about the difference between 3 and 500. It's
Yes.
ridiculous.
We're just stuck in this
scale.
little area. We're
Yes.
stuck in this little area, yes.
And a really aggressive customer will say, I only got 490 lux, you promised me 500, and you can say, sort of. But I'll just share with you that we have I'm teaching at this lighting design program at the Aalborg University in Copenhagen, as you know, and we had first year students coming in our light lab where everything is complete black. We put a candle on the floor, had a circle with a radius of 1 meter around it, and we asked these 20 people to sit around that candle. They know now they got 1 lux on the face because they are 1 meter away from a candle. And when you're sitting there giving your first lecture for 25 minutes, the room gets brighter and brighter. Of course it doesn't, but our eyes adapt, just as you said, slowly. And when the professor I'm working with, Nanette, she said, can you see now? You can start to see the expression on your faces and you can see the clothing. And then I added, and look around, you can see the entire room, even though the walls are black velvet, the ceiling is black, you can still see the size of the room with 1 candle. And everybody should do that just to get a feel for it, because that makes it so important what you're saying, that the scale is enormous. That we can actually see all the way down from 0.1 and up to 100,000. And an eye doctor told me once that he claims that you can feel, maybe not see, but detect one photon that hits your retina. I think that's maybe a little, but nevertheless, so the scale is enormous.
I don't remember if it was Deborah Burnett or Jacob Lieberman who told me this. Okay, but it might have been a combination of both of them. To be honest with you, like listen, I did just listening to they're expanding their pre-science in a way where they're expanding into and what they're reaching for. Those two people. I don't know if you know Dr. Jacob Lieberman, but
not personally.
That would be the podcast for the ages, the two of you. I'm telling you. Oh my goodness, that would be an amazing one. And anyway, he's an optometrist or an ophthalmologist or either one of those two. Okay, and he claims that most issues with human sight are actually emotional issues, and people are choosing to be blind. I'm not kidding you. That the actual.
No,
let's go ahead. Yeah.
No, I've heard it before, and I think I've listened to a presentation from him actually quite a few years ago.
It's really actually mind-blowing when he talks about.
But he has written a book that's called "Take Off Your Glasses and See." I think
it's called Luminous Life, or maybe he has more than one book.
That's maybe another one, but it's actually a training program where you gradually train your eyes every day, because the muscles in here is not the same as the muscles here, you know.
Yes.
So
yes, but one of the things I'm not sure if it was Deborah or him, but it was one of the two. He said, first of all, you got to get outside more, because what happens is when you're outside, your retinas are and let's say you're walking down the street, your retinas are going. You have your shade from your eyelids. That's why you have eyelids and eyebrows, because they're like a baseball cap, right?
Yep.
And what happens is, as you're walking down the street, you're focusing on what's right in front of you to check if there's any obstacles. Then you look up and you see further down the road, and then you look up and you see as far as you can, and then you go back and forth and up and down. And this is like an eye exercise. It's like doing
Mm.
curls for your eyes, right? And
Yes.
so that this idea that the in Asia they're having all these issues with people having glasses. It's out of control. I think it was 5% in the 1960s, and it's up to like 60 or 70% of Asia
Yeah.
is myopic. Like that's
Mm.
completely crazy. And the only thing that has changed is people are not going outside as much and they're staring at screens. But
Yeah.
we can learn from that in the lighting industry, in that incorporating what do they call that? What's the word for windows? Jim Benya says it all the time. Uh, a French word for windows. What's the French word for windows? Fenestration.
Beats me. Yeah.
Fenestration, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Fenestration, and then skylights and sun tunnels. I think as an industry, we should begin to embrace that business as a lighting play. Let that skylights and sun tunnels and windows are not separate from the lighting system. They are, in fact, the most important. And in Sweden, you guys have a right to have a window, I think, right?
Yeah.
In your
Yes,
office,
that's
right?
right. Yeah.
Right? It's
Mm.
I think that's the right attitude about it. And that we need to start incorporating the fenestration and the skylights and the sun tunnel
Yeah.
in as lighting designers. And I know Jim Benya does that, but I don't hear
Yeah.
about it a lot from the lighting design community. Is it different in Europe? Is that where we need to go?
No, it's exactly the same. It's still somebody has got this silly idea that they are competing with each other, but they are complementing each other.
Yes.
It's actually, and when people say I shouldn't talk so much about daylight or I should just talk about electric light, I say, guys, no matter how much daylight we take in, it'll become night. And we need
Yes.
exactly the same amount of fixtures to light up the university campus in the winter during night because it's dark. But there is something where you don't really think twice. You just say, "Oh, if we get so much light in, they don't want to buy my fixtures." And I think that's the biggest fear, that people in the lighting industry see a loss of market share, but that won't happen
Mm.
because it'll become dark. After all, I would say what I've learned by listening to your darkness pod is also that it'll probably be a challenge if we say that we are not allowed to light up the buildings because stray light might come out into through the fenestration out into the surroundings. But that's another issue anyway. So if people were in there working at a hospital during the night, we would need exactly the same amount of fixtures.
Yes.
So if people would stop thinking about losing market share because of daylight, it's not a competitor.
It's not
It's
a
a
competitor.
complement.
And not only
No.
that, though, it's the same problem with the darkness restoration and preservation. We're not talking about less lights. We're talking about the single biggest lighting boom in the history. This is going to be bigger than the invention of the electric light bulb in the first place. If we commit to this, first of all, we're going to solve a major environmental issue, which is
Mm.
not something we've done since the Montreal Protocol back in 1985, where they banned PCBs or chlorofluorocarbons or
Yeah.
whatever,
Okay. Yeah.
CFCs. Like we actually
Yeah.
did it. We actually
Yeah.
did it, right? And we
Mm.
haven't done anything since then. And the lighting industry is obsessed with carbon emissions, which they can't really do much about. We've mitigated everything we can mitigate, right? Electricity usage continues to go up. Leave that to the clean energy folks. What the lighting industry can do is give the earth back its darkness, give it back its
Mm.
cycle, give the creatures of the night their space to live, and without compromising safety, without selling less light fixtures. In fact, Henrik, we're going to sell more. We're going to sell more than we ever sold.
I'm with you on that one. Absolutely.
So oh yeah, I just went on a rant there, but whew, I'm so passionate about it because there's so
I
many
hear that.
reasons to do it. But the most obvious one is because we want to make a ton of money. And I know it sounds bad to say that, and people like Colligan's just wants the money. I do want the money. I'm a lighting distributor. I want to sell a lot of light fixtures. And if you get into a board meeting at Fagerholt, guess what? They probably talk about money a lot. You know what I'm
Oh
saying?
yes. Mm.
So
Yeah,
we
I
all
know
want to get
exactly what you're
rich.
saying.
Now, on that piece, do we need to rename the industry? Is it the lighting industry or is it the lighting and darkness industry?
That's a very good point. But I listened to a presentation a few years ago from a guy from Spears and Major in London, and he was giving a presentation on darkness before it was like hyped. Now
Sure.
much more people luckily are talking about it, but he gave a biblical reference and adventure that we are brought up with be afraid in the dark.
Mm-hmm.
We see horror movies. The Bible is you're boosted into a dark hole like hell, or so darkness is very very hard. If I say I want your money, I can sell you some light. Light is positive, wonderful, beautiful, love, butterflies, and whatever. We have unicorns, but darkness, that's spiders and snakes and all that. So it's so hard just to say to people, I can sell you some darkness. I don't want that. It's evil. It's bad. So there is
Well,
something that,
Christ is the light of the world, right?
yes, there's
You
something,
know?
and there's a dark lord somewhere else. It's just it's everywhere in our language, in our myth, in our mythology, in our religions. So it's really really hard for a lighting designer. He was selling in a master plan. I think it was for Edinburgh, and he wanted it to be dark. And people, we don't want to pay for that, you know. Dark is if you don't pay anything, but it's really not. Darkness you get if you pay for an intelligent way of applying darkness. Because people think they are afraid in the dark, but maybe they are, but maybe they didn't have to be if we did it smart. So I think that the lighting design and maybe also us doing the lighting fixes and the distributors could really gain from that by understanding and acknowledging the work. You can see there are national parks now, there are guided tours to come and see darkness. And it was something that you and I talked about it some other day where we say we grew up with it.
Yes.
But but when I have been giving lectures in Shanghai, for instance, I was at a university giving a lecture for architect students, and I asked these young people, how many has ever seen the stars? It
Yeah.
was around 10% who raised their hand.
Sure.
And then I asked, anybody seen the Milky Way? No hands.
Yeah.
So it's really like something that you could see every day in your childhood. They've never seen it.
Mm.
And it's like, oh, I'm getting goosebumps because I'm so sad that we have lost the darkness. And I don't
Okay.
think it's dangerous and it's
Well,
scary like that.
I also think we find what is sacred in the dark too. Like there
Mm,
is also a one way is to look at the darkness and you have the fear, but there's also the
yeah.
sublime there. You know, that's where the sacred exists with candles and fires and these kinds of things. And
Mm.
so now people would say, Colligan, what are you talking about? I want to drive my SUV home safely and my kids got to walk through the park or whatever,
Yeah.
right? And I understand that and we want to deliver that. We're not saying that. But what you
Mm.
said earlier was that you said it when you were just talking about Edinburgh, that we provided darkness. I think the lighting industry can also strategically and with planning and safety in mind provide darkness, eliminate 70% of light pollution. What a
Mm.
difference that would make. We're not
Yeah.
talking about eliminating all the electric light at night. What we're saying is responsible outdoor light at night.
Yeah. Yeah. I was traveling the south of England a few years ago together with a lady from the British Bat Society because there was so much threats about bat being eliminated in the southern parts of England. And when we should have these joint immersions, she had 45 minutes talking about bats, and I had 45 minutes talking about street lighting. So I was afraid that this was going to be a real fight, you know, and all the guys from the distributors, from the electrical consultants, from the road authorities were there. And it was so beautiful because she was very, very open. She said, all we need is darkness in a corridor. Switch off 3 poles so that they can fly through here. Do it from 2 o'clock in the night till 8 o'clock in the morning. That's enough. And of
Hmm.
course we could do that. We have all kind of control systems. And she had a map over the southern parts of England showing dark corridors where the bats could move, and they would free so many of these bats that are staying inside the church towers, which is really the worst. If you floodlight a church tower, the
Yes.
bats live inside, they won't fly out and they starve to death. So it's just about turning the light off, and it can be at midnight, it can be 2 o'clock, everything helps. No need for red light, green light, blue light, or all that stuff that we put in. Darkness is what the animals and the humans need.
Yeah, it reminds me of the surface disinfection where they're trying to find this magical number that kills bacteria but doesn't hurt humans. And I'm just like, guys, like, that's enough. We
No.
don't need, that's not a good idea. But, it's interesting. I would love it if a Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, for example, would get a grant because to really say, you know what? We're wasting our time indoors with trying to find this business case for lighting controls when the most obvious business case for lighting controls is in municipal street lighting so we can provide the bats their corridor so that we
Yeah.
can give the migrating here come we have all the information, right? Here come the bird migrations. Okay, guys, the lights are going down to 1500 Kelvin and 90% down over this time and this time, and they fly over. We give them their lives back and their chance to thrive in this world. Like, I mean, I believe that humans have a soul. I don't believe animals have a soul. I don't even know why I believe that. But you know what? I think they have a right to enjoy their time in this world too. It's limited. They're going to die. I want them to have their chance to fly and not fly into a building or whatever, not get eaten by the cat because they're out in under a 5,000 Kelvin street
No.
light. I feel bad for
No.
them. I don't want them to have to do that, have to deal with that. So, and it's sloppiness. It's sloppiness. It's lack of attention to detail. It's we have all the technology, all the knowledge, the engineering, we have the research, we know what to do. All we need is the will to do it. That's it.
All the things you've said is in my world and in my worldview correct, and I appreciate it. The thing that worries me a little bit, which is not really there yet, is flicker. Because when we have flicker from LEDs, we don't know the sensitivity for animals. There is a hypothesis that I actually tend to believe is that the faster an animal moves, the faster it needs to update the retina. Because if you're a turtle, you don't need 50 hertz update. But if you're an eagle or a falcon that attacks with 110 kilometers an hour, or a leopard, you need to update much, much faster than we do, not to stumble over something or bump into something. So there is a
Mm.
tendency or a hypothesis that the faster an animal moves, the quicker it needs to update and the more sensitive to flicker it will be. So if we are having birds of prey, for instance, they will probably see flicker everywhere right now, whereas a duck or a dove or a turtle won't see a thing. But it's not
Hmm.
really well documented, because if you ask biologists, I've asked quite a few of them, and they say we don't know. Maybe they have one sample from one duck or something and said, it's very, very hard, because even you and I might have different sensitivity for flicker. There's a statistic spread in humans also, but in animals, we honestly don't know.
I have a story that I find like is perfect for that, and I couldn't get an answer. So early on in the Starving for Darkness, now Restoring Darkness podcast, we interviewed a fellow that we couldn't release the podcast because he was so upset. I think he was epileptic or something. And no, it's really sad because he
Yeah.
was having seizures because of the outdoor streetlights. And when he described it to me, he was absolutely convinced it was because of the Kelvin temperature. But after the show, I called him back and I said, your symptoms are being caused by LED flicker, not by the
Probably.
Kelvin. I said, you're sensitive to the flicker from the light. That is, early on, they were going off on 0 to 100, 60 times a second. And fluorescence that, Dr. Arnold Wilkins in the UK studied, that was only 70 to 100% every 60 cycles of hertz or 50
Mm.
cycles of hertz, right, on T12. And so you're talking 0 to 100. And I thought to myself, like, this is a very serious problem. And I've been following the flicker issue for a while. And I don't hear anyone talking about flicker free like T8s were. I only hear about low flicker
Yeah.
or, and I don't know what that really means. It sounds like marketing to me. It doesn't
Yeah.
sound like a solution.
No, there are still a lot of debate on how to measure it and how to do, but first thing is that we need to listen to people like you listened to the guy who were hypersensitive, because I had a real wake-up call when I was sitting together with 10 people who was who has built a group. It was in the UK, I think. They built a group for hypersensitive flicker people, and they saw flicker everywhere. And it's so hard. We are sitting in a room, you're sitting next to them, and they say all the lamps in here are flickering. You can say, yeah, I don't see any flicker. And all these old things, when we say I need to see it with my own eyes, I need to see it to believe it. And suddenly I had 10 people around me who told me that flicker was an enormous problem for them. And the funny thing was that the guys, they got migraine after a while. The women just felt it annoying. None of them had any migraines. So there's a clear split in that group of 10 persons, that the guys got a headache. The girls just thought it was really, really annoying, but it didn't hurt them. So there's so much we need to investigate. But the first thing is to accept that I'm not sitting with 10 people who are lying to me,
Yes,
but
for
they
sure.
actually
Agreed.
see flicker.
Yes.
And like we are, no, this is above 60 hertz, it's not flickering. What an arrogant thing to say,
It
because
is.
there is clearly people who can see it and sense it in maybe even a subliminal ways, and we don't have a clue what the animal can see or sense.
I always compare these types of things to sunburn. Like some people sunburn really easily, and other people can be
Yeah.
outside on the beach all day. And you know what? Like, look, this is not, African versus European descent thing. My
No.
father-in-law is really white, a white guy in the winter. In the summer, he turns into like cocoa brown. Like he'll tan like that. And so I always compare it to kind of, so because when we can see the visual effects of sunlight on our skin, it kind of a
Mm.
comparison. But you have a redheaded person, they have to wear hats, they
Yeah.
got to cover their skin, and they're more sensitive to it. And so we're
Mm.
not we're not all built the same way. Another comparison to that I've been hearing is this idea that some people are sensitive to cellular phone waves, and there's a sense of hearing them, that they can, when they go close to cell phone towers, they can hear like a low level sound coming from it, because they're just waves, right? These things are just, light is just a
Yeah.
wave, and
Mm.
sound is just a wave. And so people can actually hear some cell phone towers. And there was another fellow that I interviewed that talked about electronics radio signal fog, that people are walking around like downtown Stockholm in a fog of Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and near field for
Yeah.
communications and wireless signals. And it's like and not everyone is, like, not everyone doesn't sunburn. Some people sunburn really badly. And so we don't know the effects of all these things. And you're right, it's arrogance. It's arrogance for people to say things like 60 hertz is no flicker.
Mm.
That's the right way to label that issue. Um, I wanted to ask you one more thing. My deepest passion, my one thing I'm trying to find out, and probably the reason I started the Restoring Darkness podcast in the first place. What is our relationship to firelight from an anthropological or evolutionary standpoint? There's something there. Do you know what
Now
it
I've
is?
heard you. Yes, I've no, I don't. But I've heard you talk about it before, and I normally see. I've talked to thousands of customers, and I always start with, we evolved 7 million years outside in nature, in Central Africa, blah blah blah, and for the last 1 million years we've had the fire, and for the last 100 years we've had electric light, sort of, to put the scale in. But
Mm.
there are so many weird theories about what's happening, but we know it works. We know that when we are sitting there, it's before that. Imagine the first 6 million years, we only had light coming from above. Now
Mm.
suddenly we got light coming from below. It was red, it was flickering, and there's something that resembles a sunrise or a sunset over the ocean, and we still think a sunset is the most romantic over the ocean, with a little ripples, a little reflection on your skin, the beautiful warm color tone. That's where you propose to your loved ones. And it has some resemblance to that.
Mm.
And then there is this, there's a guy I know from Denmark, a brilliant researcher, who talks about phase transitions. That when something changes from solid to liquid, from solid to vapor, from liquid to vapor, these fascinates us. We like these transitions. We like sitting at the waterfront, because there's different between water and sea. We like to stand in the glade because that's where the trees stop and the grass comes. And most of all, we like to look at logs just being consumed by the changes from solid to fire. So there is something about phase transitions. And like you can look at an ice cube melting or an ice tap where the
Sure.
water is dripping in the winter, and it is just stunning that that happens. So I
It's
think
true of
it's a very,
clouds too.
very
Lying in a field and
yes,
watching clouds go
yes,
over. Yes, yeah,
exactly.
it's the same thing.
Yeah,
Yes, there's
yeah,
something spiritual in that transition. That is how
yeah.
life is created in those transitions from one to the other. I'm going to correct you. Fires don't
Please.
flicker. They don't flicker. They glimmer.
Ah, yeah. They
Nasty
don't
LED.
flicker. Yeah,
Nasty
yeah.
LED lights flicker.
I buy
Fires
that.
glimmer. They glimmer.
Glimmer. Yeah, I buy that right away.
Another
But
thing.
but there.
Go ahead. Finish up.
No, no. It
Yeah.
was just there is something that it has saved our lives, and it has created, normally I say it created community, created language, created groups, because you sample around the fire in the evening. You had a little time to develop a language. Before that, we were more
Yeah.
like that instead of
Sure.
having a language. So it's done so much good for people, and I think you and I know that deep inside in our stomach, in our hearts, that that fire is good somehow.
It's the hearth. It's the heart of the home. The way we built our homes
Mm.
around fires
Yes.
as well. It's interesting. Another angle to this, which I think is another sort of part B to the argument, or part B, is the sauna idea. So this
Mm.
idea in all northern cultures across the globe, there's some kind of sauna or hot rock ritual that our ancestors independently created on their own. And I actually have a wood
Yeah.
sauna. I'm blessed. My father-in-law has a wood sauna, cast iron wood sauna at his cottage in northern Ontario. And I'll tell you, we go up there in the winter and we go out into the sauna, and then we come out of the sauna and we stand around in our bathing suits in the snow talking for 20, 30 minutes. We walk over to the fire, we stand around the fire, we have a couple beers, we go back into the sauna, and we're walking around and it's negative 20 outside, and we're in our swimsuits and we're going from the sauna to the fire, from the sauna to the fire, because your body overheats. There's something to that heat coming that is like the sun. It's creating vitamin D. I'm telling you, it's doing
Mm.
something for
It's doing
us.
something.
It's doing something. I'm telling you, if you go do this, if you go into a freezing cold climate, not a sauna at the local gym around the corner, what I'm telling you is get into nature where it's cold and freezing, and the days end at 4 o'clock and the sun rises at 8:30 or whatever, and you
Mm.
have a really short day, and then go have an experience, a serious sauna experience, and you will find it's the same after. You feel the same. You sleep better. You fall asleep so wonderfully. Um, there's some vitamin D play or something similar to that sunlight experience, and we discovered it through fire. We discovered it through saunas. There's got to be something there, Henrik.
Yeah, I think so. But I've been working a lot in Finland, and they are like world champions in saunas. It's amazing. Every meeting ends with a sauna, so it's very formalized. So it's another story. We can take that some other day. But there is something about the wavelength and the depth that light penetrates into our body. Because if sunlight hit my arm now, it would the infrared rays would have warmed me up approximately 1 centimeter into my skin.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's a cold blue LED, it just lights up the surface.
Mm.
There's nothing. And the fire has that. It warms up like sunlight. The old incandescent had it. When I was a kid, I could sit next to a 60-watt light bulb
Mm.
and read, and I could feel the heat on my
Mm.
shoulder, on my face when I was
Mm-hmm.
reading. Now
Sure.
it's nothing because the wavelengths aren't there. And they've been with us since the evolution of mankind. It's
Yes,
been with us in sunlight and in fire.
but Henrik, there's no difference between heat and light. It's the same
No, it's
thing.
just a different wavelength. Yeah.
Yeah. Right, and what I'm suggesting is that massive heat coming at you from the sauna has the
Mm,
same effect as the sunlight. It goes below your pores. It
probably.
causes something to start reacting and start to go off or whatever. I'm not a scientist. Scientists out there, please research this. We would love to know the answer, right? Yes, I actually I truly believe we have some kind of deep relationship. Hopefully, if you discover it, you tell me right away. And if I
I
discover it,
will.
I'll tell you right away.
Please do. Yeah. Hmm?
um, any final thoughts for the Get a Grip on Lighting listeners? I know this is your last, well, not your last time, but your last
Yeah.
regular time with us.
We will probably meet again somehow. You still
Mm,
owe me a beer in the airport, so it's
somewhere.
somewhere. No, I think you're doing a magnificent job, and I'm not just saying that to be kind, but without you, I wouldn't have revisited some of the things I did. And we have an idea that what we read when we were kids is still the truth. But I have the privilege working with my boss that 8 hours a week I'm allowed to read scientific papers. And if I don't get it, I call the guy or the girl who wrote it and I ask them. So keep learning all life. Just knowing what your mom and dad told you when you were kids may not be exactly the truth because it's probably gone 50 years and now you're sitting there being a lighting distributor. So don't go with the science that you learned in school or the prejudgment that your mom and dad told you. Stay tuned. Keep looking at podcasts like the one that you do at Get a Grip on Lighting because you are challenging the things all the time, making people curious, and it's so fun to read. And very, very few people does it. I asked my coach. I've had a coach since I was 30 years old, and I said to him, "Why is it that our sales guys from all over the world they call me and ask the most simple questions? I know already they know the answer." Yes, he said, but they want to hear it from you because I'm not smarter than our sales guys. I just have the privilege to read some papers. Like we are having a conversation now. None of us are nuclear scientists in any way, but we are talking about it. So start talking about it and not say, "Well, I learned that from my mom, and that's the way it is." Boom. And I think that's this life is like we talked about the life of animals, which was a beautiful metaphor. It's a continuous learning experience, and you need to keep learning. So much is going on an exponential curve, unfortunately. So you can dig in any object you will. Please, Michael, stay digging in the light. If you dig in there, there will be so much new research coming out. So many of the bright scientists you already mentioned, all the people you know, and they can share that with you. They can help us understand. So it's really really important. That's what you're doing for us, and I appreciate it a lot.
Well, you know what I would say uh, about um, what I've learned from you or what I observe from you and what I've learned is that number one, be authentic. Ask questions if you don't know. Like, there's no, Henrik Clausen isn't a poser. And that's why people turn to him. He is, you're genuinely interested in finding the solution and you're willing to be vulnerable. And that's what I saw in this show is that somebody
Hmm.
who's, you know, the guy who's, gets asked all the questions has some questions too. And
Yeah,
don't be afraid. As Henrik says, don't worry about so much what your mom said was the truth. Find your own truth. Be willing
yeah,
to incorporate the spiritual with the sacred, with the science, with the research. Try to bring it all in and absorb it because those things are individual pieces. And I've really enjoyed listening to and really appreciated the contribution you've made to this show. And I am so sad to see you go.
right now I'm sad as well, I must admit that. So but it's we still know each other, and I will be listening to you at least. So I'll be joining, following you guys. But thank you very much for giving me this opportunity, Michael. I've learned a lot from you being my coach on this one
Mm-hmm.
and from your staff. So thank you.
Mikase Sukasa. Anytime you want to come on, doors open. And folks,
Thank
you've
you.
made it to the end here with my good friend. I haven't met him yet, but he's my good friend, Henrik Clausen. Thank you. We appreciate you. I know he appreciates all the guys out there that listen. And we'd like to tell you about, I don't, hopefully we can introduce Henrik to Keystone, but I want to tell you about my friends down at Keystone Technologies, the Big Easy, Light Made Easy. Go to their website. It's KEYSTONETECH.com. And of course, the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors who make all of this possible. We love you guys. Bye for now.